Milan, is with Caavo, you solve a little problem, but it's a little problem that happens a million times a day, which actually makes it into a big problem. And that's sort of how older people interact with the TV, and that the TV really is this great tool that gets a sort of suboptimal use, and you really cracked this problem in a really amazing way. So why don't you just sort of give me 30 seconds for the audience about what Caavo does, and then I've got some questions for you about what it's like working in the senior space and some of the lessons you've learned.
What Caavo is good at is all things TV. So communicating through the TV, content management through the TV, anything you'd want to overlay on your TV, messaging, that kind of stuff. So we're really, really good at all things TV. So it was a pretty natural fit when we moved over to this market. And that's kind of what we do. So all things TV, moving TV to whatever content you want to watch, being able to communicate through your TV via chat or video, allowing communities to put messages up, put reminders up for activities that they may have going on in their communities. So pretty much all things TV.
And the other part you didn't really touch on, but I think is actually for senior living consumers or senior living operators, a really significant part of it is that turning TVs on and off, multiple remote controls, is a huge hassle, which means that a dozen times a day, one of two things happens with residents. Either they end up just not watching TV, or they come to staff and say, help, my remote won't work. And you have essentially solved that problem.
Right. So anything that you have in your room that's connected to the TV would now connect to a Caavo. And then you would just use the Caavo remote to control everything. So whether that's just the set-top box or a Blu-ray player or a Roku, the minute you plug it in, we'll recognize what it is, and will basically allow you to just use one single remote to do everything.
Cool. So you have been on this very now for
call it about 18 months.
Yeah, about 18 months in the senior living space. Very new to very different than consumer space, but in some sense the same as it. So what do you see as different? What excites you more? What's a bigger hassle?
Right. So the commonality I mentioned earlier, right? Both markets love TV. So on the consumer side, it's almost like audio video files that care about resolution and being able to manipulate every little piece of their TV watching experience. Sort of seniors love TV, but more for different reasons, right? Like it's a primary entertainment source or news gathering source for them. But they are more so interested in, I'll call it, regularly programmed cable TV shows that are coming on a weekly basis, watching those things live. Whereas on our consumer side, it's a mix of that, but also sort of streaming products as well. What we're finding is with Caavo, we sort of lean into both of those things because of the consumer part of it. And so what we're seeing is once we put in a Caavo, that sort of seniors are way more open to watching streaming things as well. So you'll stick in a Roku as well, and then you'll get access to Netflix or YouTube or whatever streaming content you may want access to. So even though in general, they're sort of more focused on live TV, they are watching more and more sort of streaming content based on sort of the Caavo being there as well. One of the other differences is just being able to use TV as a communication platform. So we really, really lean into that in the senior living market. And the ability to video calling or chatting using TV is a real focus for us in this market specifically. And then the last piece of it is this whole concept of their staff in a community as well, that needs to be looked after. And our goal is really to not add any work to staff, but really make their lives easier as well. So we've got, you can actually push activities reminders directly to TV or manage your ticketing through the TV. Like if a resident has like a maintenance request, they can do it right through the TV, and you're not just getting a bunch of phone calls or having to like have these paper ticketing systems to sort of manage sort of communication with your residents as well. So I think those are some of the big differences between the consumer world and this space.
Cool. So as you walk this path, what went well? What worked kind of as you expected, and what are some of the surprises that you've run into?
Yeah, I mean, so we're the first ones to say that this was a completely new thing for us. Like we had not done years and years of research. What we did have realized very early on is that we had a platform that was perfectly built for this market. So very TV centric, solved all things TV. As you mentioned earlier, like we know what the inputs are, we know whether the TV is on or off. It's one remote. We know exactly what's plugged into it. Those are all things we were able to lean on as we went into this market. But then there were other pieces that we started building out through a pretty robust beta process that we went through as we entered this market. And so those were things that were more research, that we felt very confident about going into this space. The key one is sort of remote control. Like for the last 5 years, we've had the ability where you can go onto your phone, you can see exactly what's on your TV, even if it was hundreds or thousands of miles away, and you could control your TV remotely. That's been super useful just right out of the gun in this market, just because if mom wants to watch something on Netflix, her son can go right into the app and say, okay, I'm going to go put something on for you. Or she's worried about where the Cubs game is or whatever, she can just sort of ask and somebody can put it on regardless of where they are. So that's sort of the obvious one that we knew was a good fit from the get-go, which is kind of the reason we came into this market to start with. That gets used a ton. We do wellness checks over TV. Different communities are already doing wellness checks in different ways, but having it on the TV was sort of a natural flow. That made a lot of sense. Family can share photos onto the TV. We knew that this market loved looking at family photos, and so getting photos onto the TV were sort of was an obvious fit as well.
So, things that surprised you, or maybe even didn't go as well as you hoped, expected?
Yeah. There were a few of those. We really expected that just handing somebody a new remote control would be like a very disruptive experience. And so we were kind of wary of that walking into this market. So there was a couple things we prepped for as we came in. We made sure that regardless of what remotes they wanted to use, that a remote would just work, even if they didn't want to use our remote. But what we found right away is sort of once that initial anxiety went away of just, having a new remote, which I'll say a few days, then that became like not a problem. And so we sort of prepared for the worst, and that's probably a good thing, but didn't really have to lean on any of that sort of supporting technology that we've built out. People are happy using the new remote once they get comfortable with it. The other bigger surprise that we hadn't planned for, that we saw great benefits from, is this market's sort of complete openness to using voice. So voice search, voice navigation using your remote, being able to ask for help or add messaging to messages to a ticket that you might be creating using voice. We weren't 100% confident that it would get adopted as quickly as it did, but voice gets used a ton, and net we're really, really happy that it does.
That is cool. So what kind of midstream approaches have you had to make? And this to me is a really fascinating question, because I've seen a number of technology companies come into the senior space where they had an idea that this is the thing, and then the industry has to adopt it, except that it didn't work for the industry and they crashed and burned. And I know you guys have made changes. So do you have any examples of things that you've had to change, mid-course corrections?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggie is sort of the market we came from, and then this market specifically is we understood that it was something different, but sort of us being able to internalize that and that build that into the product was not as clean, I'll call it. On the consumer side, we pretty much give the end user access to all the knobs, bells, and whistles, any tweaks they want to make, and we really focus on like the level of detail that a consumer can use our product. You know how detailed they can get as they use our product. In this market specifically, we learned very quickly that you didn't want to just dump all this functionality into somebody's lap in one day. And luckily, the product is sort of modular enough where you could like put in pieces at a time. And so what we learned is that during like maybe the first few days, the first week of an install, you just hand them the remote and get them used to a new remote. They can just sort of navigate their TV, use their interface, see their community calendars and their dining menus and that kind of thing. And then you start slowly turning on some of the other stuff, right? Like the wellness checking or reminders, or let them start doing ticketing over it. But you can just start turning it on as you feel people are getting comfortable. And so I think that was the biggest lesson learned, is that you don't need to like just sort of dump everything in and like try to teach everybody everything all at once.
So one of the questions I have is, I know that one of the things that you can do is to do these wellness checks where you actually turn the TV on. And I know, of course, it's all permission based. You don't just automatically have somebody show up. So I want to sort of make that clear as I frame the question. Is that a challenge, or people just feel comfortable if there's somebody who can do that, or what are you finding?
We train every single resident on what they're going to expect. So we sort of put everybody through what a sample, and a lot of this we do one-on-one, which with each resident is really just put them through what they're going to see and what's going to happen. Since we do have full TV control, yes, we can power the TV on if that's what the community chooses to do. But we also can control the volume as well. So it's not like the TV turns on and the volume's blaring. We do have sort of full control of the TV. And so it's the experience. You can kind of like manage the experience exactly the way that is comfortable for your residents.
So you've been in the industry, you're learning things, you're starting to hear from people who are saying, wouldn't it be cool if, what are some of those wouldn't it be cool if kinds of things that we're looking at that you're willing to talk about or can talk about?
Yeah. So the one, and these are like I mentioned before, it's things we hadn't completely expected, but we've got this functionality which we call Bullhorn, which is not a super official name for this capability, but you can basically send a message out instantly to your entire community or to various groups in your community. That piece of functionality gets used a lot, way more than we expected. Elevators down, lunch is ready, the bus is leaving for the mall. This piece of functionality gets used a ton. And so we're starting to lean in more and more. We believe there's a lot more that can be done with this functionality as well. I'll just leave it at that. There's the pieces of it that are secret, and I think you'll hear about it as sort of the next few weeks go on. But that's a piece of functionality we're really leaning into. And then the other one that we just want to do more and more with is voice. I talked about that a little earlier, but you can do so much with voice. It's not just go to channel 7 or launch Netflix or send a message to my daughter. You can do all sorts of TV navigation. You can send messaging all over the place. And so a lot of that requires a lot of sort of underlying technology as well, which we're working through, but we really, really want to lean in on voice as well. And so that's sort of on the, now it used to be on the longer term roadmap, but now that's been brought in substantially.
Yeah. I'm really fascinated by the whole idea of voice. I think that it's something that I actually don't use as much as either in my business or consumer part as I think I should. The one exception to that for me is that I'm using a lot more transcription services. So I just think the voice is one of those things. Any thoughts on, am I just unusual about that? I mean, it sounds like you're getting widespread adoption on voice and I find myself, we've got an Alexa who sits in our family room, and I played some Christmas music on it earlier this week, but it's probably the first time I'd had any interaction with it for 6 months.
Yep. And we honestly kind of made the same mistake as we started building this technology out. Like, we should have leaned into voice more so sooner. But the findings have just been incredible there. And the parts that I think have contributed to that is COVID, I think, accelerated a lot of this. Like, just the whole ability to interact with technology and finding new ways of interacting with technology. I think COVID accelerated a lot of the people's openness toward adopting different ways of interacting with technology. The one that we hadn't planned for that we absolutely should have is if there's any sort of visual impairment as well.
Yeah.
So if anybody with visual impairment, you literally have to press the one button on your remote, and you can say CNN, you can say volume up, you can say volume down, you can say power on, power off. Like, we're really leaning into that button, so you don't really even have to know what's on the remote or what's sort of all these other things that you may, in the past use to navigate what was on your TV. You can basically just use the one button and sort of navigate the whole thing. And so the visual impaired thing we like I said hadn't planned for, but that one is a big driver now as well.
Yeah, we have a family friend who lives in a senior living community who has very, very limited eyesight, and one of her highlights of her week was being able to, during COVID, was to be able to attend church via YouTube.
Yep.
And my wife would have to drive over there and set it up for her every week. And the idea of being able to have her control of either via phone or being able to have her just say, to push a button and say turn on church is just, what a tremendous increase in quality of life, savings for staff, and all those kinds of things. So.
Yeah, no, it's been super rewarding, and that use case that you're talking about is the exact one. I mean, you've got these now sort of readily available large screens that are sitting in your rooms now, and I don't think we use them correctly for not just visually impaired, but all sorts of different sort of things that you may want to see. Like I mentioned earlier, just seeing photos on a large screen. We've got people that have streamed Little League baseball games directly to mom's TV, and so mom can now sort of partake in that as well. And that's through COVID, that was huge, right? Like, being able to actually be involved in family activities, but doing it in a very comfortable way as well. So yeah, all of these things have been great.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this technology. I just think that, these are the kinds of things that are really change the quality of people's lives. So much of, we expect all this, we're looking at these big, huge solutions. A lot of them are just tiny little things that come together to make the quality of people's lives much, much better. So I applaud you for what you guys are doing. You'll find the link to Caavo, their website, so you can get more information in the post down below in the comments. So this is something that I think will be mainstream in virtually every senior living community in the next 2, 3, 4 years. It could be a huge differentiator for you as an operator as you're looking to increase occupancy. So big fan of what you're doing. Appreciate your spending time.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Steve.